This episode of Rookie Hunter is brought to you by the Wild Sheep Foundation. Become a member, join the Lesson 1 Club, and attend their annual convention, Sheep Show, Reno, Nevada in 2020. For more information, go to wildsheepfoundation.org. Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome to episode 104. Today on the show, we have Jesse Zeman. Been on the show a number of times. He's with the BC Wildlife Federation, and he's a wealth of information. I always feel like I need a nap after Jesse comes by, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. Just a lot of information, a lot of things to consider, a lot to take in one sitting. So for me, I think I'm going to have to listen back to this one once or twice just to digest everything that we covered. And I hope you guys enjoy it if you're in BC or not. There's always issues in your neck of the woods, so just keep that in mind if you're not from BC. Jesse also mentioned a paper called Saving Endangered Species Using Adaptive Management. So we've included a link to that in the show notes. You can check that out if you want. We can also put that up on our blog if you want to find it there, therookihunter.com. Working on a new project that I'll tell you more about eventually once it all comes together. But we're out on Okanagan Lake over the weekend looking for wild sheep. And we came back late at night. We were dealing with a bit of a headwind, some waves, and I was sitting at the front of the boat and I was getting wet. But luckily, I brought along my cloudburst jacket and pants. Those are two things that never leave my backpack and save me from getting soaked all the way home. The cloudburst jacket and pants, they are Gore-Tex. They're 100% waterproof, breathable. If you want to check the jacket and pants out, there's a link to both of them on our website. All of our Sitka gear is up there, and if you're interested in checking it out further, click on the photo and it'll take you to Sitka Gear's website. At the moment, I'm wearing my Lesson 1 Club t-shirt. I am a member of the Lesson 1 Club. Hopefully we can change that in August, but if you want to become a member of the Wild Sheep Foundation and the Lesson 1 Club, you can head over to wildsheepfoundation.org. And while you're cruising the interwebs, might as well head over to northarmknives.com and get yourself a blade that's made right here in British Columbia. Big thanks to all you that left reviews in return for decals. I've sent most of those out in the mail. There's a few left to go. If you guys don't get them by next week and you left us a review, let us know. I'm pretty sure I got everybody, but there was a lot of them, so I may have missed a few. I hope not. But keep those coming. We got another 200 decals hitting the printing press today. So if you're wondering what I'm talking about, we want ratings and reviews, and we're going to reward you with a caribou decal that you can stick wherever you want. All you have to do is go to iTunes, leave a review, take a screenshot, send it to us along with your mailing address, and we'll get that to you in the mail. It's for North America residents only, so Canada and the US. If you're somewhere else, we love you guys. Appreciate your reviews no matter where they're coming from. Anyways, let's get into this episode. Sit back, relax, crack a nice cold beer, and enjoy episode 104 with Jesse Zeman. Well, Jesse, welcome. What number is it? I was just scrolling through here to see when you first came on. July 19th, 2016. That was episode 13. You destroyed us with that podcast. We were pretty naive about the state of wildlife in British Columbia at that point. I want to listen back to that. And I was thinking one of these early episodes, I actually say that that BC is doing a good job of managing wildlife in British Columbia. That was when the first three, and quickly found out that wasn't the case as soon as we got you in the studio. So, and I think that's the case for a lot of people who live in British Columbia, is that they think that wildlife is protected and healthy, and it's not quite the case. We've learned over the last 3 years. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks for handing some of the baggage off onto you guys.
We've got the weight on our shoulders now too.
Yeah,
absolutely. This is fourth time, I think, that you've been on the show. So cool. You still got to come on one more time for that green jacket.
It's got to be you. It's going to be a nice one too, I think. We're going to go to Value Village and get something nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Like the Saturday Night Live 5 Club.
Yeah. Well, where do we start? It's a interesting time that we're in right now. It seems like a day doesn't go by without something, I don't even know what the right word is for it. Aggravating and interesting and everything in between.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a lot of angry people out there right now.
Well, should we start with some of those angry people?
Sure, if you want.
A lot of conversation around anti-hunting groups in British Columbia. And as far as I know, this is, some of the same groups that were involved with shutting down the grizzly bear hunt are now going after, predators in general, I think. And they seem to do a pretty good job of making noise and getting attention and the kind of attention that benefits them. But what are your thoughts on their approach and how it impacts wildlife in general? It's a pretty broad question, but
yeah, I think so. If we start with the conversation about conservation, I mean, what becomes pretty clear when you check these groups out is that they're not really conservation groups, right? The definition of a conservation group is someone who gets involved and does something related to taking care of wildlife. And so when you look at a lot of these groups, they're more animal welfare type groups, or anti-hunting groups that kind of call themselves. They've co-opted the conservation group name, and I think that when you look back at some of those groups before, when they were considered less legitimate by the media, they used to call themselves environmentalists, and they did some research, and the research said if you want to become considered more legitimate, then call yourself a conservation organization. So, when we look at some of these groups, we don't see them at meetings or involved or giving money or buying habitat or doing ecosystem restoration. I mean, it's just not what they do. So in terms of the conservation piece, they're just not those kind of entities.
Right.
And then when you look a little bit deeper, I don't get into the where money comes from and where it goes, but their objective is to close hunting. They'll say, we're not anti-hunting, but we support hunting in these cases. And the reality is they don't. When we look at one of the groups that's in the media a lot right now, they were also the group that was trying to get moose hunting shut down on the Clapan rail grade in northern BC. So, they say we're only opposed to trophy hunting. Well, no, you're not. You're opposed to all hunting. You're opposed to people who go up and want to go moose hunting with their families in northern BC. So you're actually an anti-hunting group. So I think, for people who hunt and fish and are, practicing conservation, people who get involved, the difference between you and them is that, first of all, you're willing to give money and you're willing to put your money where your mouth is. So you're willing to get involved and do things. So you've kind of got a leg up in that sense. The other big thing about all this is that when you consider how many people buy hunting and fishing licenses and how many people who are involved in conservation who are not part of this kind of group of anti-hunting movement, there's not a lot of them. They seem to get a lot of attention in the media. But when we talk about changing public policy and making sure that hunting and angling is maintained and making sure that wildlife conservation is a priority, what you're going to find pretty quickly is that you actually have a much bigger voice than they do.
Right.
Because you have, 100,000 hunters, you have 300,000 anglers, you have all their family members. So pretty quickly, when you add all those numbers up, you're going to cover at least a quarter to a third of the population of BC, whereas these people are going to make up a couple of percent, really. And so, people are very threatened and they like to engage these people online. I don't think that's where the value is. I think the people that you want to engage are the people who, who don't hunt or are hunting curious or don't like hunting. And those are the people that you want to talk to, and those are the minds you want to change. So, I see a lot on social media where people are going after these groups, and it's just not worth the squeeze because you're not going to change their mind. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of them, and they're not the people who are going to write policy, right? So the people who are going to get worked up about this stuff are going to be your neighbor or your sister or your coworker, and those are the people you want to talk to. So, in terms of, you got this volunteer energy and you're mad. And so the question rapidly becomes, how do you deal with this in a progressive manner? The advice has always been the same. Talk to your politician, talk to the opposition, talk to your family and friends, because those are the people who count, right? Engaging the anti-hunting groups it's a waste of time, really. Yeah. Might make you feel good for an hour or a minute. It's not really going to do anything.
Progressive is a good word. Collaborative, respectful. Like, I don't think you're going to get collaborative, progressive, respectful in that social media environment.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And you're not going to, like I said, you're not going to change these people's minds. Yeah. And they have it in their mind. That Grizzly Bear Foundation public consultation, that was classic. I went to Vancouver and presented at that. And it was awful. It was more like an inquisition, and there were people talking from the crowd. And yeah, the chair couldn't have been more unprofessional. It's like, this is not a forum to talk about grizzly bear conservation or grizzly bear hunting. This is a forum for everybody to kind of backslap and talk about getting rid of hunting, right? So when you have these moments of anger about anti-hunting movement or anti-fishing movement, you got to figure out a way to channel them progressively. And after the grizzly bear hunt thing happened, I wrote about it in the BC Outdoors too, and just said, here's what they're going to come after next. And the angling world kind of thinks that they're immune from this. There are a lot more people who angle, who fish, or who have a closer connection to fishing. So you're not going to be under the same light, but what you're going to find is that fishing methods like sturgeon, catch and release, steelhead fishing are going to be put into that same basket.
Yeah.
Right? So don't think that this is just about hunters. It's about consumptive use. And it is ironic that Patagonia has entered into all this and weighed into all of it and given money to one of these groups because, they're big advocates of fishing, including catch and release fishing. So there's a lot of irony in that. But definitely, I think people who are consumptive users that hunt and fish, I guess don't think that you're not going to be under the lens.
That generated a lot of social media pushback from the hunting and angling community. Well, at least the hunting community. I think it shut down their Facebook page
a couple times now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, using those anti-hunting groups, we should almost use them as an example of what we should be doing. Because if a small group of people can make a change, there's no reason why a large group of people couldn't and can do so respectfully. And with Patagonia and British Columbia, I was kind of keeping an eye on that and watching what people were putting for reviews on their Facebook page. For the most part, was very respectful. Shut down the ability to comment and leave reviews on their page twice, I think, and for a couple weeks at a time. I haven't looked recently, but I think that's the kind of stuff that actually will make a difference. They haven't said anything, as far as I know, or commented on the whole involvement with that group, but at least people are being heard to some degree. So I think it's a good start anyways, and it seems like a shift in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've had quite a few conversations with Patagonia to that effect, because there's a lot more attached to these groups as well. There's a whole, there's a few issues going on with death threats and people who've been threatened, and helicopter companies, biologists who are threatened. And that's all due to that group that's involved publishing people's pictures, publishing biologists' pictures on the internet, saying these are the people that killed wolves. Well, those people actually weren't out killing wolves. They were out counting mule deer. Mm-hmm. So they put up a picture of the helicopter company and the people who were on there. And so then these people are at the, short end of people who want to send them death threats and all the rest of that stuff. It's just completely uncalled for. It's, you're basically advocating for violence. If you can't see that putting that picture up of people is not going to result in death threats, you have to know that that's going to happen. That's an outcome. And so all the people who are tied into that, it's pretty disappointing to see, a group like Patagonia get involved in that for sure, because they're now well aware. I've made them aware and sent them emails, and there's, RCMP has a file on them. The COS has a file on this. Yeah. So you're nobody knows how concerned they should be about it, but it's pretty disappointing, I guess, to have a group involved in that.
Yeah, for sure. Did they give you any kind of feedback when you wrote in? I saw your letter.
And so we had probably a half dozen emails go back and forth, and then they sent it on to their stewardship team, whoever that was. But I haven't heard back from that part of it. It's a bit of a black hole, but I just, just laid it out, because the responses were just opposed to the hunting of these species or trophy hunting or something to that effect. I said, well, here's cougar hunting. I've never met anyone who just shoots cougars for the trophy. Never. Like, that's never happened. On grizzly bears, yeah. On cougars, never. But I also said, you're saying you're only supporting this group for this reason. This group also tried to close moose hunting in northern BC. They also said that there's no hunting regulations in BC and that people are wasting the meat and they're just there for the antlers. I mean, none of this is true. None of it's substantiated. And when you talk to the conservation officer service up there, like, they'll say that that's all not true.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I think the only exposure that people get as non-hunters to something like cougar hunting is the photo of them with the cougar.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem, but I don't think it's ultimately the problem. Like, I think there's that education gap there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we've had cougar now 3 times.
Yeah, it's delicious.
Like, cougar tenderloin, it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's kind of got like, it looks like pork in a way. But yeah. And then bobcat, I was hearing on Meat Eater podcast, Ryan Callahan's looking for bobcat because he wants to try that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people eat that too. So
we normally have it at the Osceola Club.
Yeah.
Bobcat or lynx. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So Mike and I were talking a while back about how we remember what it was like to be on that side of the fence because it was only 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I do, in a way, like, I understand where they're coming from. I think we all do, but it's just kind of how do we cross that gap and educate them a bit.
One of the questions we got was, what were our thoughts on I don't know what they were calling it, but it got labeled as the killing contest in the Kootenays, and what we thought about it. And basically, it's like you just have to look at that from a different angle and understand how that looks from the outside looking in. It doesn't really look that good.
Yep.
And I think BC Wildlife Federation came out with a similar opinion on it, and I don't think it was that well received. It seems pretty simple to both of us that you have to be conscious of how this looks, and it just gives fuel to these groups to say, hey, look, there's killing contests going on, and just that label just doesn't sound good, right?
Yeah.
There's other ways to go about it, and we understand why something that needs to be looked at and something that needs to be done in some cases, but just doesn't look good.
Yeah, I think it's still, it's these people that who don't hunt, or I think that in a lot of those cases we're kind of our own worst enemy because we're not, if someone doesn't like what we do, well, instantly there's a reaction that basically says, F you.
Yeah.
Then I don't care about what you think or what you do, and I'm going to continue to do this. And maybe that's not the right approach. Maybe this person, you're able to educate them. We know that the anti crowd, you're not going to change their mind, but we know that there's all these people who don't hunt that you can probably try to educate them. It might not work, but it's worth trying, right? And so I guess in that case, don't tick off these people who just want to know more, or tell them that they're idiots, right? Just sit down and say, here's why I hunt, or here's what I've done, or I've gone cougar hunting, or whatever it is. Just try to explain it and validate the fact that you understand that they might not like this. I mean, like I said, on my own, on personal Facebook or whatever, we've never had anybody say that I don't like what you do, or I don't like the fact that you've gone cougar hunting, or that you hunt grizzly bears. I've never had that, but it's just because we're not usually telling people to pound sand whenever they say that they don't like something. It's like, hey, can I try to explain to you why I do this, or what I get out of this, or why I enjoy it, right? Or why don't you come hunting with me and try it?
Absolutely.
Right. And quite often when people go out and try it, it's like, now that I've tried hunting, I have a whole new understanding and a whole new appreciation. So
the first thing I think people notice is you spend hours and days to get out there, and then the chances of you actually getting something are 1% to 2%.
Yeah.
And then they realize, oh, okay, this isn't like you're just going out there with laser beams and picking off animals like they're just standing there like a video game. It's a very low percentage game.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to, the reason people do it is because you want to get out there. It's not to go pull triggers.
Yep.
Because you're not going to pull triggers. I haven't pulled a trigger in 2 years. Actually, no, I did get the bear. But in terms of deer and elk and moose, and I've tried, I haven't pulled a trigger in 2 years.
Yeah.
I don't think the public understands that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. That's I had an interview to that effect a while ago, and I said, look, like, the thrill is the kill. It's like, if that was people's motivation, then we just have a bunch of farms where you could just go shoot something.
Yeah, true.
It is. That's what we would have. If
Yeah.
this was just about killing something, then we'd have like 2-acre enclosures where people could just go kill stuff.
Yeah.
And we don't have that. Right. So if we,
Yeah.
So it's not about that. And I mean, I think it's every 14 days per kill for deer. It's going to take the average hunter 14 days to go out before they're going to get something. So that's just not true. And same thing with this the trophy hunting, and the one guy that got busted recently. I had a reporter that wanted to talk to me about that. And I said, I can tell you how I feel about it. But I said, you asking me this question like I'm going to know? I said, it's like asking someone with a driver's license about drunk drivers.
Yeah, right.
I'm just not going to be able to fill in the voids for you. I just can't. I can't do that.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I don't know what that person's motivation is because I don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak from my experience, but in the moment of even pulling that trigger, which I don't think the public understands, your heart's like ready to jump out of your chest. And it's not necessarily the excitement of like just getting to a stage where you might be successful given how hard it was, but like half of it is like the seriousness of the situation and the fact that you are thinking about that, like, what you're doing in that moment. And that's a very difficult thing for anybody to do, including a hunter, but we know why we're doing it. So it kind of like there's this net outcome that we want to get to, and we push through that. But it's not like we're going around thinking like, oh no, I don't care about this animal at all.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Anyway, so that we go into that for
that's
for hours.
The hardest thing about it is you can't explain it to somebody who hasn't done it. They have to experience it.
Yeah.
And if they experience it and it's still not for them, then that's fine. But I don't think you can really have an opinion on something that you've never done.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I would recommend if people know people who are critics and their friends or whatever, I would just take them.
Yeah.
Just go out and just say, hey, why don't you come and try this and see how it goes? And everybody reacts differently to going out and shooting an animal. Like some people, it's like instinct kicked in. Other people wait forever. Other people are nervous and can't do it. I mean, it's just it's totally variable, right? But yeah, I mean, I think, really this conversation is more about finding these people in the public who are not sure and saying, hey, why don't you come? Or here's how I do it and here's why. And, not being mean or malicious about it when they make a snide remark on social media. It's like, take that opportunity to try to educate them. And then if you don't want to educate them or they don't want to learn or they don't like it, okay, at least you tried.
We've talked about this a couple episodes ago, but I shared one of the One Campfire videos, the first one, and a guy who's I consider him a friend, and he was also a client of mine, saw it, and he's vegan, and that was it. He didn't want to talk to me. He was, just not into the killing of animals, and there was no opportunity to, even though I invited him to let's sit down and talk about it. I'd be happy to share my thoughts on why I do it, but just wasn't having it and blocked me, and that was the end of that.
Oh, it's
a bummer, man, because I felt like that could have been a good opportunity. I've never really been in that situation where it's been that, like someone's been that offended by the fact that I hunt and a guy that I knew quite well, and I thought we had a good relationship, but that just pushed him over the edge, and there was no way to talk about it.
Oh, that's too
and
bad.
it's a bummer. But that being said, there are lots of other opportunities to educate people and to, I think, having them try wild game is a big game changer too, because I hear it over and over and over again is, oh, I didn't know you could eat that, or I heard sheep meat's gross. Why are you guys going on a sheep hunt? It's like, well,
when's the last time you had
have you ever
sheep
tried
meat?
it? And who told you that it was gross? And if you did try it and it wasn't good, well, I'd like to know who cooked it, because they probably didn't do a good job with it. So
Yeah,
you just go down the list of all the species and why you shouldn't eat it. But they need to try it. And once they do, they're like, oh yeah, this is quite good.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I guess it depends on the person, because there's other people who are vegan that I know too, and they don't hunt, they don't eat meat, but they fully appreciate it. Like they have more respect for people that hunt than people that buy meat. They'll say, it's not for me, but I'm glad that you're doing it this way as opposed to doing it this way. Because I have a real problem with doing it this way, and animal welfare related stuff around big practices around growing animals, and they say, this is okay with me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and that's what I said to him too, is that we have more in common than you think.
Yeah.
And let's chat about it.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to hear your side of it, and happy to tell you why I do it. But yeah,
it's too bad.
it's too bad, but is what it is, I suppose. But
And then the other part about that conversation too is when you open the door, there's always other people watching these conversations too, right? Who are not sure. And so, especially with social media, you might be influencing a whole bunch of people that you don't even know, because they're not going to chime in, but they're watching how this dynamic works. They're like, okay, this guy is really not a bad guy, and I get where he's coming from. So just the way you kind of conduct yourself,
Yeah,
and you're able
absolutely.
to kind of
Yeah.
keep it cool and try to articulate your position, people appreciate that. So, you might lose one person, but you might have a whole bunch of other people
Yeah.
that are watching.
Yeah,
going,
absolutely.
Okay, this is okay. It's pretty
Yeah.
powerful in that sense.
yeah, I think so. And that's a good point. You have to be careful about what you say. And before you write something, maybe put a draft somewhere else
Mhm.
in a Word document,
Yeah.
write it, sit on it for a bit, read it over a couple times.
Yeah.
And then when you feel good about it, then you can post it.
Yeah.
But-
Some days it's hard.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on that subject as far as anti-hunting groups and
No, I mean, I think, like I said, it's really hard to see what goes on online right now, and all the rhetoric and all the people who are picking sides. And I mean, I think, if you want to do something productive, engage your MLA and engage your friends and family and coworkers. Like, that's the most positive, powerful thing that you can do.
yeah.
Don't waste your time with all the rest of the BS that goes on, because you're not going to get anywhere. It's just not, it's like, going out and trying to move a beach full of sand with your hands. You're never going to get that job done.
Why do you think hunters are so quiet or have been in the past as far as stepping up to the plate and making sure that this stuff doesn't happen?
That's a good question. I don't really have a good answer. It feels like it's a BC thing, because in the States, they
it's
don't
totally
stand
different.
for that.
No, they don't. Not at all.
They don't. And I feel like even the guys in Alberta don't stand for that. And I don't have the answers on that. There's some research that needs to be done there for sure. I don't really have a good, I mean, same thing when you watch social media, like one of these topics comes up, and then, by the fifth post, the hunters are fighting with each other.
Yeah.
Never mind the people that they started the post about. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. Part of it, there's, I think, some challenges demographically. I feel like the older demographic has this way of conducting themselves that younger people don't
Yeah.
like to kind of engage with. It turns them off. I think that's part of the challenge. But yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't have a good answer for that one.
Maybe we're just getting too much fresh air out there and we're just too relaxed to do anything about it.
Yeah, I don't know. Part of it is shifting baselines, I think, is that people today, young people didn't get to fish Thompson steelheads. They don't know what they're missing.
Right.
Right? They didn't get to hunt caribou. I mean, a lot of these guys got to hunt caribou in areas where caribou are now endangered. So for them, maybe there's more of a feeling about this really is awful. Whereas for younger people like us, it's like, well, I never hunted them. And I think that's part of the caribou story, and why people are so bent out of shape is part of it is like people don't get to hunt them. So it's not as big a deal as moose, maybe. I don't know.
I've never actually seen a caribou.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, me neither.
I certainly care about them, but
Yeah.
I've never actually seen one in the wild, which is, I think it's part of why we're sort of always on that topic. It's like at one point they would have been in the Kootenays where we grew up. And
Oh, yeah.
it should have been
Yeah.
something that we grew up with, but we didn't.
Yeah.
And I've been through Jasper and Banff and that, but I've never seen them in there either. So yeah, it's kind of interesting that that's part of it. But you're absolutely right. Our generation just doesn't know that those things were around at one point. So it's hard to miss something when you don't know it was there in the first place.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's education, I guess.
Let's talk about caribou. Where's the best place to start with the caribou conversation in BC?
Well, conservation, maybe science. Should we
Yeah,
start there?
that's probably a good spot to start.
I feel like the conservation discussion is the place to start. I mean, there's lots going on in that world, and we'll get into the social and political stuff after maybe. But
Sure.
the science on caribou is, caribou generally suck around predators. They're
Right.
just not built to be
Mhm.
around predators. And when there's predators around, they get tipped over and they decline. That's what happens. And so when we change the habitat, i.e. log it or whatever, add roads, that brings in higher moose densities, which brings in more wolves. And we know that linear features like roads and trails help wolves move across the landscape. So you go in, you do oil and gas exploration, or you do logging. Logging brings in more ungulates like white-tailed deer and moose, which brings in more wolves, and then the wolves have access to the caribou. And in the wintertime, same thing. If we have snowmobile trails that go into the alpine, then wolves, which would have historically stuck to the valley bottoms, get into the alpine and kill caribou. So that's the science, right? So habitat is the ultimate cause of caribou declines. The proximate cause typically is wolves, right? So in the short term, you're going to have to shoot wolves, period. If you want caribou, you have to kill wolves. There's predation from cougars as well down south here, which is quite high. There's predation from bears as well. But the big one is wolves, right? That's what kills caribou. So short-term fix for sure is going to be wolves. And then the longer term, you can do a whole bunch of things. You can take care of habitat and basically get rid of all industry, which is highly unlikely, but that's what you can do and get rid of people. You can continue to manage wolves. You can manage moose and wolves. You can manage other ungulates and wolves. So there's a whole bunch of tools underneath it, but that's the science piece. Like that's caribou recovery in a nutshell. So those are all the things that you can do. And then when we get down into the rest of it, that's all social and political.
Right.
So federal government and provincial government, this critical habitat piece, this review that they did, this has been years in the works. I know there's lots of politicians making points off of this, but this is nothing new. It's been going on for 5 or 6 years. This talk about this critical habitat protection assessment. So everybody knew, former federal government, former provincial government, current provincial government, current federal government, everybody knew that this was going to happen. Everybody knew what the likely outcomes were, right? I think the biggest screw up in all this is that the provincial government and federal government decided to basically cut everyone out of the conversation and just go do this on their own with First Nations in the case of the Northeast. And so I think that's where the majority of the heartburn is 2 years after this process or 18 months after the process started, they just came out and said, everybody, here's what we're doing. And so that's where a lot of the fallouts happen. And there's no real excuse for that.
Right.
From a political perspective, you can't take people who live in BC or in Canada and just say, here's what you're doing and not include any of them. It's just not acceptable. So, that's the political and social issue. And as a result, there's all kinds of fear mongering that's going on. And that's, the politicians are going to wear that. That's entirely self-induced. That's their own fault.
Yeah.
And then I think kind of part of what's frustrating underneath that too is that the elected officials who have been involved in this then sent all of their staff out to do the public consultation. And some of these people are caribou scientists. They're not social people.
Right.
And so I think that was pretty small picture and pretty disappointing. And these ministers who were involved, because they were told by their staff multiple times that you should be engaging the public and talking to stakeholders while you're building this plan. And they decided to do it behind closed doors. And now they've opened the doors, and the people who should be facing the music are the politicians. And the people who are facing the music are caribou scientists. And it's not really their job.
Yeah.
It's pretty unfair, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
So, and then there was a paper recently published, I don't know, I can send you guys a copy, that basically showed all the different levers that they've tried on caribou. So it talks about predator management, it talks about habitat, it talks about all the things that we've done, and it shows what works. And so prior to that paper, we had all of these groups, the anti-hunting groups and, don't shoot wolf groups, saying there's no science that supports shooting wolves. There's no this, there's no that, it's unethical. And so now the science is in, and it says shooting wolves actually works. It helps.
Right.
Right. So that paper is pretty powerful. I'll send you guys a copy. You can send it out. And so it shows what has worked. And so now all these people that said, well, there's no science that supports this, have now changed and said, well, it's unethical and they shouldn't have done this and they shouldn't have done that. But at least the science is in, and it's clear that, yes, this works. Yes, you can do it. And it's helping caribou, or it's stabilizing them at least.
And you figure that's short term though. Like how long?
Well, it depends on, so the rest of it is social. So the rest of it is you can turn these places into basically a park, right? And so to get into old growth, you're talking 80, 100 years in a lot of these places to get back to a place where caribou are going to be able to manage themselves. And in the short term, which is till then, you're going to have to shoot wolves.
Yeah.
That's just what you're going to have to do. You don't have a choice. If you want to keep these things in these areas, you're going to have to manage predators because caribou just suck around predators. And so, you're going to have a goal, as in, here's what we want for populations going forward. And then if the objective over the long term is to get rid of all people and people using that, then you have to be willing to face those trade-offs.
So is it the conversion of some of these areas to parks that are potentially going to result in like forestry being, and then towns, certain, like I know we've read some articles about some areas up north where the mill in the town is potentially going to be shut down. And
yeah, in Chetwynd, one of them will potentially be shut down. And so, I mean, down in the Revelstoke area, they did that in the 90s. They did a bunch of land use planning and which slowed logging down dramatically, right?
Yeah.
And so that's part of what happens is, do you want to just go out and shoot wolves, hundreds every year, or do you want to pull the habitat lever and the wolf lever at the same time? And so those are social decisions, and that's where we have this urban-rural divide, where it seems like a lot of people in rural BC are okay with shooting wolves. People who live in urban BC, i.e. the Lower Mainland, are not.
Yeah.
And so...
And they're not impacted by the mill being shut down, so...
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of that. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, acknowledgement, I think, of those people that are going through that is important on all sides. Because if I was one of those people, I'd probably be saying, I don't care about the caribou right now. But, I think from a long-term perspective and an overall solution and trying to find the best balance, like it reminds me of just the climate change discussion and the Kentucky coal mines discussion. And like, there's going to be impacts, period. So like, unfortunately, some folks are going to be impacted.
Yep.
And I don't know what the answer is there. Like, I don't think there is an answer where everybody's happy.
The politically, I mean, from the economics perspective too, the fair thing to do is if you're going to have an impact, and I don't know the forestry file intimately, but if you're going to have an impact where people are going to lose their jobs, it's up to the federal and provincial government to step in and say, here's a transition plan for you. Here's money to offset or to get you moved somewhere to retrain you. That's really what they should be doing if caribou was a priority.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do moose fall into this? This is something I've seen recently, is that cow and calves are a topic of discussion, and as far as having LEH opportunities to help caribou as well.
Yeah. So that's the apparent competition piece. And apparent competition basically means one species goes up, predators go up, and then another species declines. And so there's a lot of work around mule deer and white-tailed deer, where white-tailed deer hold cougar populations high. Predators impact mule deer more because they're easier to kill, basically, and mule deer populations decline. The caribou moose thing is the exact same. So you go out, you log, you create perfect moose habitat. Moose populations go to the roof. Right behind them, wolf populations go right to the roof. Then you have all these trails that help wolves move across the landscape. Summertime, wintertime, caribou end up getting killed. So that's the moose caribou story, really, in BC. Cougars and bears are a part of that. There's no doubt, but that's the story. So in that case, like I said, you can shoot wolves, you can shoot moose and wolves.
Right.
And so in some of these cases where we're doing wolf control, the moose, the calf to cow ratios, so the number of babies coming up was like 60 or 70 calves per 100 cows, which is higher than a lot of our deer counts.
Right.
So that means that the moose population is absolutely taking off. So you can let the moose population take off, recognizing that there will be more wolves in the landscape that you'll have to manage. Or you can let hunters go out and hunt these moose and shoot them and eat them. So again, that's, the science will say you can do wolves, you can do moose and wolves. You can't do nothing because caribou will disappear.
Right.
And so hunters often have a real hard time with that because they want a lot of moose and they want a lot of caribou. And, if you're going to do both of those, then you're going to have to shoot a lot of wolves every year, and it's going to be expensive. So,
right.
So there's the social part, which is people don't like wolves being shot from helicopters. And there's the, the science part. And the science part, that's going to be really expensive to do that. So
there's a lot of calls to action, I think, from hunters to go hunting for wolves, but I struggle with how we do that in certain areas. Like I know Mike and I have been hunting for 5 years and we've never seen a wolf. So I don't know, like as much as we would like to help and we want there to be or unlimited, wolf hunting to help out with this problem. In some areas, it's very difficult for hunters to take that whole load themselves. Like we have to use some other tools to help that too.
Yeah. So the wolf piece, basically, it changes. But basically, you can shoot a lot of wolves, but not see a response in moose or not see a response in caribou.
Yeah.
So you could shoot 50% of the wolf population every year. You go out, kill half the wolf population. You won't see a change in caribou for sure. You probably won't see a change in the moose population till you're getting up to shooting 70% of the wolf population every year. You're not going to start to see those other animals respond. So license hunting, hunters will shoot the odd wolf for sure, but you are not going to manage wolves with hunting.
Yeah, 70% you said?
At least.
That's a huge number, man.
At least every year. It's not something that you do 1 year. Once you start it, you don't stop, right? And so it's at least 70%. 70% a year, like you will see a response in moose. Moose will take right off. That relationship's really strong. With caribou, it's less clear. So caribou is going to be, you're going to have to harvest more to see a positive response in caribou. So it's expensive, right? It's really expensive. It's time consuming. Socially, it's very controversial. And it's not that it can't be done. It can, right? In Alberta, they've been doing it. They've also been poisoning wolves with strychnine in Alberta until recently, which is a very nasty poison, which is not canine specific, canid specific either, right? So all these things come with costs, financial costs and social costs. But yeah, that's the apparent competition story. And in the case of moose and Revelstoke too, the interesting thing about that is there was a time when there were probably 1,600 moose north of Revelstoke, which is probably better than Newfoundland, like highest density in North America. But the thing is, when you stop logging, the habitat starts to transition back, and you're going to have those moose will go back to what they were historically. If we got rid of logging, there were probably around 300 moose from Revelstoke north. As logging goes offline, as these cupups grow up, moose are going to disappear anyways. So the land is not going to carry 1,600 moose just because we don't have the logging that we once did. So the question is, do you have 60 cows per 100 cows and not let hunters hunt anything because you want the moose population to grow, even though 10 years down the road it's going to start to decline due to habitat? Or do you let people go out and hunt moose populations that are really productive, right? Because if you're turning out 10 cows per 100 cows or 60 cows per 100 cows, that leaves a pile of meat on the table that hunters can harvest. Complex problems, complex solutions. And for hunters, I think what you hear a lot from hunters is that they want the days of 1,600 moose back. And I mean, the habitat right now probably won't support it. In 10 years in Revelstoke, probably not. So there's always this habitat piece, and it's like you can harvest today. Wildlife populations are doing well. A lot of times hunters want to stockpile those wildlife populations. Stockpiling wildlife populations is never a good idea because a bad winter is going to come by or the habitat's going to change and those animals are going to disappear, right? But hunters, I think, a lot of times struggle with that.
Yeah.
Because they want it always to be really good.
Yeah.
Like the park.
Yeah, nothing's easy, man.
Yeah. So that's the apparent competition. That's the moose caribou stuff. And a lot of times hunters, and I get it, but they want a lot of everything. And I'm just not sure if.
Yeah, it's a good thing to want, I guess, but it doesn't necessarily make sense either. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish everybody'd approach the problem the same way. There's got to be an appropriate way to approach the problem, and oversimplifying it and having everybody, uneducated or not, have the same voice and like certain mediums is just anything in the world now is just hard to get a problem solved because everyone's going at it from their own fact, which is different than the other one, which is kind of contrary to the fact. Like that's not what a fact is.
You can find your own facts.
I don't know. It's just a big mess.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't think you can really debate the science on this stuff. Yeah. Like it's not debatable. It's values that are up for discussion. But I think being honest about your values is the important part to say, I would rather manage for more moose and harvest, manage wolves in these areas. That's a legitimate discussion.
Right.
As opposed to saying, well, all we have to do is shoot all the wolves.
Yeah.
right? Or on the opposite side, you get the BCS PCA that says there's no science that supports shooting moose or shooting wolves for caribou. And it's like, what? I mean, that couldn't be farther from the truth. I mean, all the science points us there, and this is so I could go off about the SPCA, but it blows my mind that you would have, they have people with science backgrounds who know better, yet they're out talking to their constituency saying there's no science to support this. Well, all of the science that's out there supports this. So you're right. It's very polarizing.
Yeah.
Do you think, like, to touch on the science in Canada and in BC, it seems difficult for people to get that science? Is that a concern or
I think
a reality?
I think it's values. I think it's
okay.
I think because, well, let's put it this way. So in terms of caribou recovery in BC, all of the major stakeholders and industries have been involved for a long time.
And they have the science for sure.
And they're all still saying very, very different things. So in certain aspects, there's definitely more outreach that could be done and putting these sciences in front of people. But the people who are heavily involved in caribou know the science, have all met with the top ecologists, and they're all still saying different things to their constituencies and to the public. And some of them are still saying that they're surprised. Well, you shouldn't be surprised because you were at all the meetings. So that's just politics. That
for
piece
sure.
of it, right?
For sure.
Mark Hebblewhite was quoted not too long ago. Somebody came, it was one of the forestry, federal, like a national kind of lobbyist group that said the science is not clear, blah, blah, blah. And Hebblewhite actually, I think, said in his quote in the paper, which was he said, that's bullshit. And here's like one of the top ecologists, like one of the great minds of ecology saying that's bullshit. And he's just basically said, we know more about these animals than any other large ungulate in Canada, which we do. I mean, they've been studied more intensively than anything else. So if there's anything we have a good handle on in Canada, it's caribou. So for stakeholders who have been involved to be surprised about this by the science means it's not true.
Yep.
So they're just playing politics.
Before we move on, anything else you want to add to the caribou side of things?
No.
We could probably spend a month on it.
That's a pretty good summary.
I think it's one of those ones too. It's like, do you want caribou? Do you want your kids to know that there's caribou in BC?
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it comes down to, because there's going to be sacrifice attached, whether you're into logging or heli skiing or you're a hunter, there's going to be sacrifice. So what's more important to you?
Yeah.
Like, that's really what this comes down to.
Yeah. And the ironic part is it's on the quarter. And what is that going to mean when they're all gone?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I feel like, said earlier, I feel like, you're better off 40 years from now being able to go show your kids caribou north of Revelstoke than saying, hey, let's go to the museum and go see the caribou that they took from Revelstoke because it was the last one left.
Yeah.
So I feel like people need to get to a place where they either decide that they want caribou in BC or they don't. Because there's a lot of people who are talking like they don't, but I don't think that they genuinely want these things to disappear.
Right. Let's jump into mule deer. Time's flying by already. You, well, around here we've got something that's pretty rare, which is funding. And you guys were able to get some callers and start to get a feel for what's happening with mule deer around here. Still somewhat early, I think, but you guys are starting to figure some things out and get some numbers back and an idea of what's going on out there. So what have you guys figured out so far?
Yeah, so we've got so we have 3 study areas in the boundary. So it's kind of Rock Creek, Westbridge, Grand Forks North. We've got West Okanagan, which is, basically West Kelowna, Peachland, Summerland. And those deer, of course, go west because we have the connector in the way. And then the Cache Creek area, which is where the big Elephant Hill fire was.
Right.
So our plan was to get 30 does collared in each one of those areas and then 15 fawns in each of the areas as well. And we didn't get all of the collars out in the Cache Creek area this year for the fawns. They were really hard to catch. But we got a bunch out in the boundary and a bunch out in the West Okanagan area. And so, it's been really interesting seeing where deer move and how they move and when they move and, quite a few surprises. It seems like a lot of our collared deer are back on winter range really early in October. Like first week, like some of them even came back in September. So that's been a big surprise, and not necessarily weather related. It's just kind of when they come back. The boundary area has been particularly interesting. That's why this was all started, was the guys in Grand Forks and Rock Creek have been saying, for like 50 years now, the mule deer population's been declining, and the deer in the boundary are tipping over all the time. Like we had, I think, 15 dead deer by March this year.
Wow.
So to put that into perspective, by that time, so in Cache Creek, we had 30 does collared and a handful of fawns. In the last year, we've had 2 deer die in that whole study area. In the boundary, I think we've had 15 die.
Wow.
From what?
Mostly cougars, cougar predation. But the science, it's early, but the survival rates that we've had, like, they're so low. It's almost like rabbits, like snowshoe hares. Like, I think our survival rate's probably around 60% in that study area, which is extremely low. Like for adult mule deer, you're going to want, for a stable population, somewhere around 87 to 92%, something like that, year over year survival. And like, we're not even close to that.
Jeez.
Wow.
These deer are tipping over like regularly. So early days, right? We could go out and collar this year and it could totally change. You want a few years of data before you really know. The other interesting thing, which is probably not a surprise, is, we've got all these deer collared in Summerland and Peachland. And historically, before they put the highway in, that was a big north-south migration. And to no one's, real surprise, I think we only have 2 deer that have actually crossed under the highway, right? So there's a major bottleneck there for sure. So hopefully, as the science continues on, they can kind of, get some mitigation factors involved. I don't know if you guys are up on the Wyoming Migration Initiative.
No.
Those guys were on the Meat Eater podcast recently, Matt Kaufman.
Yeah.
And they were, that's where all this like movement ecology is happening. And they just have some amazing work done. And they were saying, for some of these species, like once you lose these migratory behaviors, it takes generations of animals to get them back.
Right.
Like decades and decades and decades.
Isn't that one of the longest migrations in North America or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just super cool. You guys got to check out the work, and they've got a whole bunch of spatial tools that show these deer moving across the landscape. But it's back to the United States proper funding model. They can really tell you about their deer, but it's just, it's really hard to see, what they're saying. I think with moose, I think it was up to like 60, 80 years. I can't remember, but it's a long time for them to reestablish. So when we talk about this connector highway going in, think about 60, 80 years in a deer's lifetime to try to reestablish, hundreds or thousands of years of migration. Like, we got a big uphill battle to fight to try to get those deer back. So there's been that. And of course, what we've always heard at all that, you guys came to the one in Kelowna, we've always heard is it's wolves, it's wolves, it's wolves. And out of all of our mortalities so far, we haven't had one killed by a wolf yet. So that's been interesting as well. Right. And this spring, the cameras, we're going to start putting trail cameras out. We'll probably have by the fall, I think we're going to plan on having 200 and some trail cameras out.
Nice.
And then in this area, in the West Okanagan, I think in the boundary, we're going to get some collars on cougars as well. So start to get a better handle on things, and, hopefully have Chloe and Sophie and Adam and Sam on the podcast.
Yeah,
they can kind of tell you guys everything, because we're kind of doing the movement piece, the mortality piece, the vegetation piece, the co-occupancy, like looking at whitetail deer, and then looking at predator abundance or relative abundance and all that. So it's big for BC.
Yeah. It'd be fun if we could get out in the field and do some podcasting out there, because it would bring it all together.
Yeah. Well, if we get if we can get out in June, we got the volunteer list. Like, man, it's like we've had a lot of volunteers out, and it's like
good.
It's
a good problem to have.
Yeah, we've had, and like the support from the community too, about people, having traps on people's property and stuff, and catching deer has just been awesome. But we'll get you out and go talk to people, and maybe get you out on a mortality investigation.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Talk about what they look for, so they can tell what kind of animal killed the deer. And
that'd be cool. I know a cougar that we should put a collar on. He has a habit of showing up the next day on my trail cam. After I go up, he shows up the next day. So I don't know.
That's good. You're ahead of him then.
We've got a picture on it's pretty old. It's probably a couple of years back now, but there's we just cut the two photos in half, and there's Kelly going up to check the trail cam, and then the next one there's a cougar coming up behind him, so it looks like it's right
Younger
behind
one.
him. But
younger
yeah,
guy.
it's cool to see him, and then to have Kelly as a reference for size with the cat right behind him is pretty cool.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
So,
but we know he or she or whatever was doing some damage up there because we found a few muleys that have been ripped apart.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. So it'll be interesting. I mean, just let the science, let all these really smart people do their job, and then come back with to us and say, here's what's going on, or here's what you need to do. And
it's amazing what a little bit of money can do, eh?
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's been really cool. And then the other thing too, the big piece in this is, Hunter's always said we got to change the season. We got to change the season. It's a buck problem.
Yeah.
And our deer are at the top end compared to North America. Like pregnancy rates and twinning rates are super high in our deer. Like very like at the top end of what we would have expected, like higher than we would have expected. So I mean, all that shows is sperm supply is not an issue.
Right.
So hunting season is not what's causing these declines. So it's good in that sense. So we can get away, hopefully, probably won't get away from it, but get away to a certain extent from the hunting regulation talk. And the irony is that the place with the most restrictive regulations, which is the boundary, is also the place where our deer are tipping over all the time. And then the place in the Thompson where they have a 3-month-long, buck season is also the place where I think we've had 3 deer die now. And 2 of them were from bullets from hunter harvest. So it's not, so the hunting seasons are not driving these declines, and it's not even showing up as something that, the pregnancy rates have been just phenomenal, actually.
That's good.
Yeah. So it's good to always check the ones that everybody talks about. It's like, okay, we can check that one off. We don't need to pursue it. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
We can move on to these other issues.
Yeah, definitely. That eats up some energy. It's nice if you can check that off and move on and put focus where it belongs. I think I might have asked you this the last time you were on here, but where did the funding come for that project?
Oh man. So
multiple sources.
Yeah. Provincial government, the Fish and Wildlife branch has put in a ton of money.
Yeah.
The BC Timber Sales has put in a bunch of money. The research branch for the provincial government has put in money. The Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation, which is your license surcharge dollars.
Yeah.
They're paying for the fawn collars, which is around $100,000 a year for 3 years. So we've never collared mule deer fawns in BC ever.
Right.
And so that's a first for us, which is big. And also, of course, they die a lot more frequently than does do. So that'll give us a bit more insight. And then the work in the States also showed, light doe. So a doe in poor body condition means a light fawn, and a light fawn means a lower survival rate. So looking at that, whether we have a nutrition problem. So that's really cool. A whole bunch of the clubs have given money. Grand Forks, Summerland, South Okanagan, Similkameen, Karamia's, Costin, Kelowna, Osceola, Vernon, Kamloops Fish and Game. I'm sure I've left some on off the list. Like everybody has chipped in. Some of these clubs, Summerland has given us, I think, $40,000, and they only have 200 members.
Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah. So the community support has just been absolutely phenomenal. Pemberton gave us money. The North Shore Fish and Game Club gave us money as well from the Lower Mainland. So it's been phenomenal. We just got word that it sounds like SCI, Safari Club International, is going to give money to the project too. So that's awesome. We don't know how much,
right?
But they're keen on the project as well. BCWF obviously has been involved. Who else? I mean, the slide now, there's no room on the slide. We're going to have to make 2 slides because there's so many people who've contributed and a bunch of private contributors. Yeah. Yeah, so it's awesome.
That's encouraging.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should end on a positive note for once. I think that's a good way to finish this thing off. No, that's awesome, man. And I think the key thing is that funding makes all the difference. So hopefully we can see that continue, and hopefully we can start drawing funds from licenses and tags and all that kind of stuff. So
absolutely.
Yeah,
for sure, man.
Anything else you guys want to add?
Well, usually we end on the negative.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. We should stop now while we're ahead.
And then we say, if you lasted this long, then
that's what you get.
So it's a good change.
Yeah.
It's my final thought.
Should point out that beer is vegan friendly, by the way.
Perfect.
On the back of the can. So.
Awesome. Well, it tastes good anyways.
Right on, man. Well, number 5. We'll look forward to getting you back and putting a nice jacket on you too.
Yeah, it sounds good. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, man.
Cheers.
Thanks.
This episode of Rookie Hunter was brought to you by the Wild Sheep Foundation, Sitka Gear, and North Arm Knives. As always, it is hosted by Kelly Mullner and myself, Mike Peterson. It is recorded, edited, and produced at Mountain Stream Audio Productions in beautiful Kelowna, British Columbia. Original music written by the one and only Kelly Mullner with help from Graham Ord, Darcy Booth, and Chip Sleedermean. If you want to help us out, there's one thing you can do. You can go to iTunes or wherever you get your podcast from and leave us a 5-star rating and a review. And don't forget to subscribe. For more on the show, head over to our website, therookihunter.com.